Hello guys, welcome back to Harman Art TV. So in today's video I'd like to talk about, is art living in the future? So yeah, let's get into it. So we're all set up in Curiosity Gallery. My artwork's in the background and some funky shades or sunglasses on. Yeah, I always like to see if I can have fun at the same time. Here is my 4 key points why I think some art might be living in the future. I thought I'd just use my art and my experience as an example. So number 1 on my list is, I feel what might determine that an artwork might be living in the future is that some people might not understand or appreciate it at first, but then say a couple of years later, that person or people will find that artwork to be acceptable. Yeah, so someone might just need time to think about it. So they'll see the artwork and they'll think, yeah, this is really interesting, but you know, I just need time to go away and think about it. And then they'll come back to it at a later date or see that same piece again, say in 2 or 3 years time, and they'll think, yeah, I just understand it. I get it. I get it now. So sometimes I feel people just need that space, that time just to think about it. And another reason could be people's view, perception, education evolves to become in line with the art. I find this can happen because, say, if, like for my art example, it's not just the artwork. We have the story, the ideas behind it. You know, what was it that inspired the artwork? What are the ideas? What am I trying to communicate? And sometimes I feel this can be quite, because there's so much depth, so much meaning behind, imbued with these kind of ideas. Sometimes it takes a while for people's mind or their education, their perception to catch up with these things. So some parts might click with them at first, but then they'll just need time to reflect, go away and think further about this to really appreciate it and understand it. So another point is that, that self-education just takes time. When you're learning anything new, I think the whole process just takes time to learn something new, to familiarize yourself with it, and then to adapt yourself to it. And this goes back to that, in the future, they suddenly just clicks, they get it, they understand it. That's some of the points I was kind of thinking about as to why some art might be living in the future. So yeah, it's really interesting to think about that. Yeah, so number 2 on my list is, when I talk about my art, people keep silent and no questions are raised. And this has happened, a few times in the past. I've done, like a couple of talks. I've done some public talks about my work. Or I've spoken to people about my work, whether that's at an art fair or a show. And sometimes I'll say, like, at the end of a talk, I'll say, if anyone has any questions, you're more than welcome to ask. And then often I have had times where, I remember one experience. It was at Inga Ceramics Museum in Taipei, Taiwan. I did a
New Taipei, Taiwan is correct.
Yeah, New Taipei in Taiwan. I did a talk at the museum there, and I remember I asked people a question. I asked people at the end, "Oh, do you have any questions you'd like to ask?" And the whole room was just silent, and it was quite eerie when thinking about it, because I was thinking, oh, maybe someone would have a question, but it was just really this eerie silence, and I've had that like a couple of times. And sometimes I think maybe this is because maybe there's too much to think about, too much information to process, to think about. Maybe they just couldn't connect to what I was saying, or maybe they just needed some time to think it through and process the information. It kind of reminds me of the situation where I learn something new that changes my outlook of the world around me. And because of this new information, I have to kind of rewire my brain to think in a new way. And I don't know if that's happened to you. Maybe you've learned something and it's just changed the way you see the world around you. Maybe it's been so profound, so eye-opening that you've had to readjust the way you think about things. And maybe that's one reason. Maybe that's because maybe that is why people remain silent and didn't ask me any questions, because maybe they could connect to it, they could relate to it, they could kind of understand what I was talking about, but maybe the information just needed time to think about it, and maybe it was just so in their face almost that you just don't know how to react. Because I'll give you an example. I was talking about things like Stonehenge, how Stonehenge inspires my artwork, and how I'm trying to, because of the whole kind of mystery behind it, the whole kind of how it was built, why it was built, and how some of these ideas feed into my work. And what I want people to take away from seeing the work is like a kind of open-mindedness that you have when you go to see Stonehenge, and how this all kind of feeds into my work. And I was also talking about how, like, the built environment we live in today, everything's kind of conditioned where you see a building, you kind of know what it is. That building is an office, that building is a house, that building is a theatre. You kind of get the idea of what it's about, but when seeing Stonehenge, you don't know what it is. There's no sign telling you what it is. Having to use your own imagination to construct ideas, and so it's this kind of idea that feeds into my work. And maybe because of this, people just, they maybe just needed the time to really think about this, because it's a different way of seeing. Well, how do you create something that forces you to use your own imagination to interpret something, rather than presenting something that people can decode on the spot and say, yes, I know what this is. So maybe it's because the information you're presenting just takes time for people to understand it, and this may take a couple of months, it may take a couple of years. And I think art is pretty good at doing this, because a lot of the times it's up to the viewer to experience it in their own way, but there are hints and there are things in the artwork that can give suggestions. And I think maybe people just and I think that's why some artwork lives in the future, because they just need time to think about these things and comprehend them and make sense of them. Or sometimes it can be so eye-opening that you just don't know what to say in that moment. The third point on my list is people might say that is interesting, then walk away. Yeah, this has happened a couple of times, when showing my work in public spaces, a bit like open exhibitions or art fairs. Maybe the people there, they're drawn to the beauty, but the overall presence of the artwork just needs time to be acceptable. Like, they see the artwork, they say, oh, I like these colours, I like these forms, these shapes, but there's something about it that feels quite strange. And I want, it speaks to me, like visually it speaks to me, but on one hand it's quite strange, and I need to go away and think about this. And in like 2 or 3 years time, you know, it clicks and they're just like, oh yeah, I understand it now, because we live in a time now where maybe in this period of time, like the concept of design has changed, and so has people's minds changed about what is beauty, or the concept of design, whether that's in home interior or buildings. And then that can have its kind of knock-on effect to the arts and how people see the arts and how this relates to the arts as well. And then the fourth and final point on my list is, you know, an artwork could relate to unspoken issues in the world around us, in society. And, you know, I think, you know, the art and story behind the artwork might be responding to truths or aspects of our lives that people might not want to acknowledge or talk about at that time. It might be an artwork that's commenting on things that are happening in this time period that people don't want to acknowledge. They're quite sensitive, but in the future this might change and people will become willing to talk about it and accept it. So that can happen as well. You could be making art that deals with these sensitive issues. People don't want to confront them now, but in the future, 5 years time, they'll be open to talk about it. So anyway, yeah, those are my 4 key kind of points about why I think some art might be living in the future, and just using my own art and my experience as an example. So I hope that kind of clarifies why I think some art might be living in the future. And yeah, I hope this video has got you to think about this, and because the art world is a big place and sometimes it can seem confusing, but I think in the art world there's a lot of meaning, there's a lot of truths that kind of feed its way in, and art can be great to, you know, let people think about either the world they're living in or imagine new things. And I think that's the power of art. And I think that's why some artwork might not be appreciated now in this time period, but maybe 3 years down the line, it will be acceptable because people's minds change, adapt, and learn, and people are then ready to experience things that they would have disregarded at that moment in time. So I thought it'd be interesting to talk about this. But yeah, I mean, let me know, what do you think? You know, is there any art that you admire, that you really like, that you think is living in the future? You know, is there any artwork that you can see now and think, you know, I think this is going to be really relevant in like 10, 20, 100 years time? Be interesting to see your comments, so feel free to put a comment in the description below. But anyway, that's a wrap for this video. I hope you've enjoyed it, hope you've got something out of it. And yeah, and also feel free to check out my Patreon channel, and I'll put the link in the description below, and you get access to see these videos before they go public, and you get exclusive content and all that good jazz. And you can see that in the description below. And yeah, I'll see you in the next video, so take care and stay well. Bye bye.